Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls from protesters for his resignation. He said early elections would only benefit Hamas and jeopardise negotiations for the release of hostages. Huge crowds of protesters blocked roads in Jerusalem on Sunday as they marched to the parliament, adding to the pressure on the Prime Minister.
Tens of thousands gathered in Jerusalem for the beginning of a four-day rally. It's the largest anti-government demonstration since the October 7 terrorist attack. Many are fed up with the failure to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas, among other things, and are calling for an early election.
So what I'm doing here is trying to change the government, because this government is a complete and utter failure, and the only way they will lead us into the abyss that we will never come out of.
Faced with increasing pressure to resign, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is standing his ground.
The calls for elections now, during a war, right before a victory, would paralyze Israel for at least a half a year. It would paralyze the negotiation for the release of our hostages, and it would end the war before its objectives are completed. The first one to benefit from this would be Hamas.
Keeping up the military pressure, coupled with, quote, flexibility in the negotiations, is Netanyahu's plan to secure the hostages' release. A key part of that plan is Rafah. Israel's planned operation there has sparked international concerns, warning of a humanitarian catastrophe. But Netanyahu insists Israel will go ahead with its plan.
We will go into Rafah and eliminate the Hamas battalions there. There will be no victory without the operation in Rafah, and there will be no victory without the elimination of the Hamas battalions there.
As the fighting goes on, Israel's delegation has arrived in Egypt for fresh ceasefire talks. But both sides have cast doubt on whether there will be a breakthrough this time. They say the gap between their positions is still too wide.
Joining us is Simon Mabon, a Middle East analyst at Lancaster University. Good to have you with us. Netanyahu just criticised protesters taking to the streets to demand these early elections, saying it would just benefit Hamas. If you could start with your thoughts on those words.
Yeah, I think we need to contextualise this in the sense that there has been a lot of anger directed at Benjamin Netanyahu over the past however many years. Most of his time in office has been characterised by anger, frustration, political divisiveness, and none more so than the past couple of years. He faces challenges from the right, from the religious right, from people who are frustrated at the religious right. There are protests and growing anger at the exclusion of military service for members of the Haredi community. And so to say that this is all about the Hamas situation or the inability to get the hostages back, I think is misguided. And I think it points to a much deeper frustration that is brewing within Israeli society at Netanyahu's political acumen and his political maneuverings.
So, Simon, the pressure is mounting, the frustration is mounting, but is there any sign of it getting to him at this point?
Well, we've heard reports that he is due to undergo a medical procedure, an unexpected one. Perhaps that is his body responding to stress in some way, shape or form. But aside from that, he is maintaining his confident, cool, outward, forceful persona that has characterized his style of leadership. He is defiant in the face of seemingly global criticism of Israel's military offensive in southern Gaza, and he's defiant in the face of these protests, which is surprising given the scale of it, and yet not surprising given that if he would be removed from power, then his legal battles, his own personal legal battles, would once again become central in his life.
An Israeli delegation, Simon, arrived in Cairo for truce talks, but while that's happening, Netanyahu is saying that there will be no victory over Hamas without a military operation into Rafah. So where does all that leave hopes then of finding an agreement?
Well, I guess this is why diplomacy is the ultimate answer here. There has to be a diplomatic breakthrough. The lives of huge numbers of people are being directly affected by ongoing military action in Gaza. The hope of a ceasefire right now is not looking good, but I think it's imperative to keep the talks going. The growing pressure on all sides to find some type of diplomatic solution increases day by day. And I would imagine that is the hope of the international community. That's certainly the hope of Joe Biden and others, that growing international pressure will put a stop to any Israeli plans to go into Rafah, but also to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages as well. So it's growing diplomatic pressure, I guess.
So again, it's a case of the pressure mounting. Everyone acknowledges the need for an agreement, but what is needed then to find that, to break the deadlock here and find agreement, in your opinion?
Well, I guess the most important thing, as in all peace talks, is trust. You need to be able to trust the other party involved in the talks. And right now, there is no level of trust. There is no degree of trust. So in the absence of trust, there has to be someone to act as an enforcer, someone who can guarantee that the terms agreed will be followed through on. And I guess that is what people have been trying to figure out who that could be. Would it be Qatar? Would it be the UAE? Would it be the US? We still don't know exactly who that broker will be. Egypt has tried to play a role as well, of course. So that's another important step. And then it gets to the nitty-gritty of what the various sides want. Israel, of course, wants the hostages returned, and that would be an imperative. That is a fundamental step that has to be taken. And then on the other side, Hamas wants to have irreversible steps towards a two-state solution. And whether both sides and the leaderships on both sides can agree to those, and in what order they can agree to those steps, that's what is going to be really tricky to figure out. How can both sides move forward, maintaining the necessary levels of trust, making sure that those steps are being enforced and monitored by outside parties, so that the trust and the dialogue and the movement can be all flowing in the right direction.
Simon Mabon, Middle East analyst at Lancaster University. Great to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.